Well, we are back again to another installment of AFF-CNY's pre-conference interview series, and I am Shemin Vizzi. Let's take a look at the next workshop presenter. They're co-presenters this time, and their title of their workshop is called "You're Not My Real Mom and 9 Other Real Adoptive Parenting Conversations." Let's take a look at what they're going to be talking about at the conference, which is just a few days away. Welcome, everyone, to another installment of AFF-CNY's pre-conference interview series. I have with us co-presenters today. So let's start off. Barbara, let's start with you. Why don't you introduce who you are? And I love to ask, let everyone know how you're connected to adoption or foster care.
Well, I'm a mom via domestic infant adoption, and I did a lot of writing for when I guess my daughter was about 2, where I could start putting sentences together again. And I did a lot of writing for Adopted Families magazine. And I wrote on their social network a blog called Improv Mom. And I don't know, that was really like me finding out about adoption through all that writing. And that really is what started it. That's why I wanted to write about adoption, because I needed information as an adoptive mom, because I got my first epiphany at the hospital with my daughter, just the importance of birth family. It was like, I went in there and they were like, "Oh, what's your last name?" And it just struck me that I had all this information about mom. I even had social security numbers, believe it or not. And here they don't even know our last name. And it was just, and then when I told them our last name, I was like, should I be telling them my last name? And then that was really the start of openness, because I was always told that openness is about, getting pictures and updates, and it's obviously it's so much more. And then again, my writing just, it was really an exploration to just keep gathering information and opening myself up to different voices and getting connected with Lori back. And that's when she and I first connected at Adoptive Families. We wrote a piece together. We interviewed each other, and it's just incredible. In her book, The Open-Hearted Way to Open Adoption, it's like a little Bible. It's all well worn in my house.
So Lori, why don't you take a second and introduce who you are to everyone in the community?
Yeah, my name is Lori Holden, and about 21 years ago, I became a mom for the first time through infant adoption. Was trained by our agency on what open adoption was, because it was completely different from anything I had ever heard of. 2 years later, that was when my daughter was born. 2 years later, my son was born. They are now young adults. And so we're in a new stage of parenting. And I have spent the last probably 15 years, my blog is about to turn 15 this month, actually on the day of our workshop, exploring the thing I needed to know about too, which is how to do the best I can for my beloved children. So I write at lavenderluz.com. My book, thank you so much, Barbara, is The Open-Hearted Way to Open Adoption, and my daughter's birth mom participated in that. And my podcast, which is now in season 3, is called Adoption: The Long View, and it's to try to help people learn the things that I learned along the way, but with the benefit of hindsight from my guests. I have a talent for getting really fantastic guests on my podcast, Barbara being one of them.
Barbara, let me ask you this. So I love asking the question of how you take a personal story and how you cross over and make the decision, okay, I'm going to go from it's close to my heart to I'm now going to share it with everybody. And I'm going to share my feelings. I'm going to share my I hate to say mistakes, because mistakes, but my challenges through this, and I'm learning as I'm writing, but how do you go from personal to just getting it out there and being okay with that?
Well, it's very hard. And I think that's probably why I stopped personal blogging. And when I got into, because I would just like, oh, am I telling too much? You know, you try to, you know, share something, you know, you forget. I think most parents do that your child, you just look at your child like, oh, my child's an extension of me. And then you realize, oh my God, this person is his or her own person. And, you know, and our stories are entwined. And I really do have to take care of what I share. So um, that's why I switched to writing, you know, really articles, because, you know, I can get a little bit of what, you know, the questions that I have without going into detail about my child's experience. But when I blogged, you know, I really did try to really get, you know, a lot, not to you know, not to have it fantastical and not to disclose things, you know, about birth parents, and, you know, and the whys about, you know, her personal story. So it was very challenging. And I think that's why I didn't have a lot of blog posts, because it's very hard. And it's, you know, I would wake up in a sweat like, oh my God, like, is that okay? You know, and it's very hard. So, you know, that's when you learn about, you know, your story, and keeping your child's story, you know, sacred just for them.
Correct. Lori, how did you get to, were you always a writer, Lori, so that way you wrote this book? I mean, how do you get from being an adoptive parent and now you're going to write about openness in a book that's shared nationally? Like, it's a pretty big, you know, like, popular book. How did you do all that? How did that happen?
I tell a story on my blog several years ago about getting spanked by some adoptees because I had started to disclose too much. And that spanking, while it was so painful at the time, it was early enough that it changed my trajectory. And it made me, I took the spirit of, I took the essence of what they were saying, which is, it's your child's story, stop sharing it, and incorporated that into my thinking. So your question is, I always a writer? No, I'd always done writing, but I was never I journaled, but I am a thinker. So I really started musing over this and trying to figure out this thing that I thought I knew, because I knew from popular literature and Anne of Green Gables and People magazine, when a celebrity adopts, I knew everything about adoption, right? But I only knew a sliver of it. I only knew the sliver of what adoptive parents and agencies who had the narrative were saying about it. And when I started through some of the groups that the cross triad groups that Barbara and I were in, when I started hearing other voices that I had not heard before, I had to rethink everything I knew about adoption. So it was that thinking process that made me, I think writing is so helpful for clarity in thinking. So writing became the way that I thought it through, ran it by others, and came up with a better, more inclusive paradigm that worked better for my children and my children's birth family.
Barbara, why do you feel that adoptive parents or even pre-adoptive parents are so scared of openness?
Because that there's another mom and dad in their child's life, and they only envision themselves like, I get to be the parent of this child, I get to pass along my traditions, you know, my family, you know, there's the grandma, grandpa, and you have all these things in your head. And you really do have to shift. It's a mind shift and a heart shift, because the fact is, you're not the only mom. And I think, you know, that's a very hot button. And I think, again, that the more you can embrace that fact that you're not, it's the less it's going to hurt you and the more open and helpful you're going to be to your child. So the less that you get to be reactive to these things and let go and expand your heart, for your child, because it's for them. It's about their identity. And I think, we don't think about that as in that we just think we're in that, I want a baby, but this is different because right from the beginning, it's not your baby until it is your baby, but still that baby has other parents and you have to embrace it. And I think that's very, very scary.
Lori, why is it important for a child to have an open adoption? Just plain and simple, why?
Yeah, and I love how these two questions tie together because Barbara had hit it right on the head. The closed adoption era, which was kind of an anomaly, we think it was a default setting, but it was an anomaly in the 20th century. That set us up as an either or. Adoption was either or. Either you have these parents or you have these parents. If we're going to have this set, then we have to completely negate this other set. And so the legitimacy of one, you can only have one legitimate set of parents. It's not that hard to shift to a both and heart set. We just haven't been, people just don't know that option exists. And so the more that we can shift to this addition and multiplication from subtraction and substitution, that's what's healthy for our kids. The premise of my book is that adoption creates a split in a person between their biology, the DNA we're born with, and their biography, the life that's written by those we call family. And so if you're adopted, you have this split. You have this family and you have this family. So openness, not just open adoption, openness is something different that I talk about, but openness and adoption is what can help integrate those pieces for the child. And so that's my answer to your question. Openness is what heals that adoption split.
All right, so let's end off with the title and description a little bit about what you guys are going to be talking about next week. The workshop title is You're Not My Real Mom and 9 Other Real Adoptive Parenting Conversation. I can't wait to find out what the other 9 are. But Barbara, explain the title. Why did you feel that this is important for everybody?
Well, because that is something, and as Lori and I say, these are conversations that may come up, they will come up. And this question will come up. And I was waiting for it. I was like, when is this question coming up? When is this question coming up? And I was like, probably blew my kid's mind when she finally asked it, because I was like, oh, I was so excited that it was finally here. So I think that's the big thing, you're not my real mom, and also that real, it's a trigger button for adoptive parents, real, I'm real, like that you're not holding this place of honor that, and also I guess it's taking the sting out of it, but that's a conversation that's going to come up. And real, I think it's the way kids talk and people talk, and to kind of pull out, like, so don't get so hurt if someone, like kids, that's the way they talk, like real and not real. They don't mean that you're not like physically here, real. It's, I don't know, it's just, they don't have the words to express it. And also people don't have the words to express it if they're asking you questions. So if you want to educate somebody about it, you can't take offense if someone's going to, they're going to make mistakes, because we make mistakes as adoptive parents, all the time, and we're trying to learn. So we want to extend that benefit to others.
We hope to take some of the trickiest situations that adoptive parents will face, like Barbara said, and provide different frameworks of ways to think about it, how to prepare for it, so that when it does happen, you're not gobsmacked. You have some tools. We hope to do this with a little bit of levity, where we'll have 2 different groups or types of questions, things that happen between you and your child, like the one Barbara was talking about, and then things that happen with other people, maybe asking nosy or intrusive questions. So we're going to cover a whole bunch of things.
Well, Lori, why don't you do me a favor? Why don't you let everybody know, as the last part of this, why is it going to benefit everyone?
Yeah, the more that everybody understands all the voices in adoption. And I realize that Barbara and I are one of those subsets, but we've done a lot of listening to adoptees and to birth family members. But the more that the whole picture of adoption gets out there, and the more that we can deal with adoptive family situations in a more grounded and well-rounded way, it makes it better for everybody involved in adoption, especially the child. So that's why.